Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the CCO of World Hotels, Ms. Melissa Gann, and the founder and CEO of ACI HR Solutions, Mr. Andrew Chan.
Thank you. That was a lot of data to digest. Thankfully, Mel, you didn't present anything, so I'm going to.
You're welcome.
I'm going to start with you, representing the hoteliers on stage. Now, there's a lot of available data, and I think STR does a wonderful job in presenting those data. And whilst I'm sure that they're all important to the hoteliers, to us out there, what would you say would be the top three or a few data matrices that hoteliers should or must monitor at least, and why?
I think rather than saying that there's three more components to it or a few more, I think the biggest shift we've seen is consumer behavior. So there's more interest in, these figures are absolutely important, but I do believe that as we hit 2023, we're going to start adding other metrics into the picture. So consumer behavior is one. It has changed. People are not traveling the same way. We've heard it all before. Blended travel, longer travel periods of being out, like Liz alluded to earlier, with 2-month trips rather than ping-ponging in and out of the country to go visit destinations. I think big data is going to be more important. It is predicted, especially in the hospitality industry, that big data will be about a $77 billion industry as we start heading into 2027. So combining that with performance metrics and what we also add to metrics, such as we talk about RevPAR, but we also know over the last few months, the last year, we've actually had to change supply and demand. Unlike an airline, where we can control supply and demand, just put on a different aircraft. A hotel can't do that. So we've even talked about in the industry of 65 being the new 100, because we obviously have some challenges when it comes to delivering the expectations and the new expectations of the traveler on very minimal staffing, which is going to be something that escalates over the years. So adding other metrics into the picture to give a more rounded view on what's happening and where we need to go, and a lot of that is going to move away from a comparison to years gone by. There is no new normal. This is just an evolution in our industry. We've been through so many in the past. I mean, I remember the years where a reservation would come to you by mail. That was lovely. And then you had plenty of time to input and mail back a reservation confirmation to someone. Now it's instant gratification. We have moved so far, so quickly, and within our industry, we keep moving at a rapid pace that the changes are as dynamic as the rate that you get today and the rate that you get tomorrow. Just throwing that out there. Did I answer your question?
You did. You absolutely did. Sandeep, anything to add on that, particularly from an airline perspective, from a corporate travel perspective?
I think the one question that a lot of people are asking is airline fares are going up, and how's that sort of playing out for travelers? I think it's important to realize that airlines have parked aircrafts away for a very, very long period of time. And so there is a time, there's going to be a bit of time taken to get them back, maintain them, and get them approved by the regulatory authorities for flying again. That is taking one bit of time. The second is a lot of airlines have laid off pilots and staff, and they've moved on to other areas. So I think there'll be a period of time when capacity comes back. Until then, the slide that I was presenting earlier, I couldn't speak perfectly because I was going through a bit of a cold, but it really reflects an increase in demand, whereas capacity hasn't caught up as yet. But that'll catch up soon.
The Singapore Airlines posted recently a $500 million profit.
Yes.
Based on...
So did Qantas, by the way.
Absolutely. So why would they be in a hurry to increase capacity in that sense if they can keep the current rate?
It's a good question. I think there'll be a period of time where it'll happen both ways. There's a demand, so there'll be a need for aircrafts to come back. And if the airlines don't put it back, other airlines will. So you know, it'll normalize over time.
What sort of timeline are you projecting, Sandeep?
So that's a difficult question, but the way we are looking at recovery is about 80% by next year.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I guess it's going to be the same question on the hotels. Higher ADRs, higher rates. Hotels are getting high yield than pre-COVID. You know, we've seen the rates in Singapore. I mean, Singapore hotels are getting better ADRs now than they were pre-COVID. Are they, Mel, I mean, do you think higher rates are here to stay as well on the hotel sector?
That would be lovely, but it's not going to be reality. I mean, obviously, we're still in a settling and a recovery phase. So demand and supply are there. We have revenge travel, we have longer lengths of stay, we have blended travel. So you can see the capacities are still quite solid, and they came very quickly. But that will peter out, and we will get to a point we have, as Fenady was talking about, we still have new inventory, new supply coming on board. So that will certainly dilute the market. Will there be rate wars? Absolutely. That will make a lot of people happy. We will start to get competitive again. I think the difference is when we talk about average rates, if we refer back to one of the previous sessions, if you look at where the average rates are now in hotels, it's still less than it was pre-pandemic. It hasn't grown that much. However, what has grown is the costs. So even though we see these lovely ADRs coming through, what delivers to hotel, what we would call no par net operating profit per available room, has shifted completely. So as much as we would love to say that we're reaping a bigger profit from these rates, we're really just covering the cost of the increase in energy. We also have risk of recessions. So there are many things that are going to play into the pricing of the future, so I do believe it will settle.
Fenady, is that what you're seeing with your data?
I will definitely add on to that. Obviously, there's so many metrics that we need to look at. Basic would be your occupancies or even RevPAR or even the rates. But we need to look into the profitability. If you're operating a hotel, there's so many things that you need to look at, your costs, your expenses. You need to be able to look at utilities. If you guys are looking for investing or even looking at expanding your business operations to another market. So these are some of the key things that you also need to consider when you are forecasting. And I guess I'm going to touch on 2 points as well. Talking about the current demand. Yes, we look at the current demand as the demand is growing, especially towards the end of the year. But we also have to consider that we have to ask our question, is this the tailwind of the current demand that we are experiencing, the end of the revenge travel? So luckily for us, we're in data. We still can see 365 days in advance what's the current demand for the hotels on a single market or different markets. And that will also give us a cue what would be the expectations of those markets. It will vary from market to market, right? So even if we say that, you know, Asia Pacific is going to be great, but we have to consider if you are looking at smaller markets, maybe like the Philippines or some smaller beach destination, you have to consider all these factors, demand and of course the supply.
But I guess
if I may add on one comment from
Yes.
your last slide.
Yeah.
The large number of additional rooms that are coming in,
Yes.
that will make a big impact on ADR.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yes, and those are your new supply. So I guess great news if you are looking into, you know, for the hoteliers who are operating hotels, that's going to be their biggest challenge if they were going to have these new competitions coming into the market, right? So if you're looking at Vietnam, we are looking at 80 to 90 to 100,000 hotels coming into the market. That's going to be good news for you in travel. If you are doing some packages for these certain markets, then obviously you will have a lot of offerings. So yes, so depends on how you would look at it.
Yeah, I saw that last slide, and that was certainly interesting because obviously that leads to your point, Mel, about rates coming back down as supply hits the market. I didn't notice major cities in there so much. Would you know where cities like Singapore, Hong Kong, and other major cities sit with new supply?
Well, yeah. Well, if I could remember, in Singapore, it's not so much. Years ago, yes, there was like a biggest supply that's going to be pumped in Singapore, especially. Well, you got Marina Bay Sands, so they're building another 1,000 rooms.
Yes, that's right.
Oh, that's great, right? So there's going to be an uptick definitely, but it's not going to be a double-digit growth for Singapore market. Bangkok is very, very robust when it comes to the pipeline. Pattaya, Phuket, in Bali, there's a lot of construction as well. But that would differ again from different markets. So that's what I can remember on, you know.
And I would imagine, along with what Liz was talking about with the influx of blended travel, that must be beneficial for the major cities.
For sure. Yes, yeah, for sure. Because being the gateway, definitely have a lot of potential positive impacts.
Now, we're obviously all waiting for one particular country to open their doors. And given that we don't know what or when that would be, are we looking at two different sets of data when we're forecasting what's to come in the short, medium to long term? Mel, and how are you dealing with this with your hotels?
I think it depends on what we're looking at. If I'm looking at Asia Pacific as a macro, then I probably will side park the stats from China. If I'm looking more closely at what's happening within China from its domestic perspective and how we're going to transition it back into the international environment, then I'm going to look at another set. So I think it's really the data that we're looking at is really relevant to what it is we're trying to ask, the question that we're asking. So how are they fitting into the marketplace? Will they fit into the marketplace? Will we use data from previous countries that have already come out of in recovery now, or will we treat it totally separately in the predictions of where it's going to go? It's similar to when you're looking at blended travel. What proposition are we now going to offer? Because obviously hotels are built to a certain way, but yet the type of traveler that's coming through requires a very different experiential product, I guess. I don't like using the word product, in order to meet their needs. So what do? Do we get ahead of the curve with China? Do we start to look at what we can do now to embrace the new traveler before they start to open? Or do we knee-jerk and try and find the best practice based on what's already happened so far? Is it predictable or is it not? And we all know that it can be very, very different. However, being it's the international traveler that we're talking about embracing, and again, China outbound is going to be huge. It will be a really good time to take stock now of how we really, really want to position in order to maximize the opportunities that will avail themselves to us.
Well, 2023 is around the corner, so have you forecasted for China reopening their doors?
Yes. And I keep moving it slowly with a hypothetical. If we open and we have another rumor that hit the market yesterday that it's a date of January 9th, sorry.
Where did you get that rumor?
I know, right? From someone in China. I'm like, okay, can you please go and clarify that?
Are we quoting Mel?
No, we're not
World
quoting
Hotels?
Mel.
9
Not yet.
Jan.
But
Write
we have
that one
heard
down.
rumor, and it's from within China itself. We have seen a very quick relaxation of regulations at the moment that have happened in a very, very fast period of time. So we need to be prepared for the fact that it can happen with a moment's notice, that you don't often get a lot of notice from China when they are about to do something. So we have always forecast. We've always taken what's been happening, and as more and more countries open, we can use that data to try and make or generate a few hypotheticals, but we just will keep shifting dates based on when we think it might happen. But anyone that's not prepared for it now needs to go back and start.
Anything to add on that, Fenady? You must be seeing.
Yeah, for
data
sure.
out there.
I mean, obviously, you're in the right track. It's when we do the forecast or the basics of forecasting, we always have to have our scenarios. And we have to be, keeps on updating our scenarios because for us, we do have model. And then if one factor will change, your model, your forecast will definitely change. But yes, we need to keep on updating, making sure that we have the right information. And when we feed that, and adjust accordingly. So yes, so definitely adjusting from time to time is obviously the key thing to do. Yeah.
And Sandeep, from a corporate travel, from an airline perspective?
So from an airline perspective, what we did see in Asia Pacific was the first couple of quarters, markets like Australia, India, and then very quickly followed by Singapore, Indonesia, Malaysia, huge rebound. Last quarter was North Asia, right? I mean, Korea, Japan, and all of us are keeping our fingers crossed. Second quarter of next year, I mean, that's the probable date that would probably work. But you're right, I mean, there's no certainty. I mean, we have to be very nimble in terms of forecasting and reacting.
But if hotels are already at 90% occupancy, some are close to full capacity, airlines are full, what happens when China does open its doors? Are we ready for that?
Well, we have to be ready for it, and it really is up to the industry to, I guess, rationalize what it is they want to achieve. Every property, every country will have a different motivation and a different segmentation. I mean, we could even say that this day and age, should we be using the same communication pieces or assumption of market segmentation from the past, when now, as an example, where would you park blended travel in a standard historical form of segmentation? How do we then communicate to those people? Are they predominantly business travelers or are they predominantly leisure travelers? Where do we put that? Or do we throw all of that segmentation out and start again? Now, China will just add and compound that, and you're going to be able to tap as much opportunity as you like. But it's what is it you're trying to achieve, and who are you going to target, and how are you going to target? Because again, when they open, there will be new airlines, there will be airlines returning. There will be new capacity added. And when that happens, you still will have an influx. The challenge is going to be, will hotels be able to sustain the occupancies and deliver on the expectations of every guest that's traveling, and knowing that resources are going to be still really restricted?
Well, on that, I mean, it would be remiss of me not to ask a HR-related question. With so much data available to us, and what I've seen is more and more companies are now hiring analysts, data analysts, and it's probably one of the roles that my company is seeing more of than any other, because traditionally we haven't had that in hotels, in corporate travel. I mean, what would your advice be, the panel's advice be, in structuring the data flow so that hotels and companies are using data most effectively? Whether they have a data analyst or not, what would be the best way to structure data so that they can actually use it effectively for their organization? Perhaps I'll get Fenady to lead on that.
That's very close to my heart, that question. You know why? Because data shouldn't be so complicated. Data should be digestible. So just a few days ago, I was in Phuket to do a workshop on simple data for hoteliers because they need to prepare for the upcoming influx, if there will be upcoming influx of, you know, the favorite source market, right? Like China, for example. But the thing is, they need to start preparing. Education is obviously key. And yeah, so really it's just, you don't just rely on the revenues, the strategists. I think everyone should be well prepared. So if they know how to understand the data, the simple data and how to read them, you know, whether coming from Sabre or their internal reports, I think that will really help them to reposition, to do efficiency. And on top of that, there is technology that you mentioned earlier. With technology available, there's a lot of automation that can happen. So that would really help a lot on efficiency when it comes to operations.
Sandeep?
Actually, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, data has to be usable, and what we're trying to do is simplify that in a big way. I mean, when you look at just the volume of data that we have, it's phenomenal. Shopping, booking, and even in terms of aircraft usage, network planning, and so on and so forth. What we are trying to do in our recent partnership with Google is to learn from them, in terms of their point of sale abilities of using machine learning, artificial intelligence to pick up a lot of that data and then form patterns out of it, right? I mean, that's something that we are learning quite actively because I think the future, particularly in the way that we shop for airlines, people are going to want, I mean, with NDC coming in and so on and so forth, people are going to want really, really bespoke, offerings, and that's going to be driven by data, right? I mean, so that I think is going to be the future for airline retailing, for hotel retailing. It's going to be quite important, and TMCs. It's going to be really, really important to be on top of that.
Mel, as a hotelier, I know you have analysts that
Absolutely.
For you.
I think that it's important, and to both my colleagues' points, there is so much data out there, but what is relevant? It's sort of like statistics can be interpreted dependent on who's looking at what and why they're looking at it. You can have those things of I'm 100% at $100 or I'm 50% at $200. It's exactly the same, but someone's going to see it as bad and someone's going to see it as good. I think there's a lot of noise around it, and I think it's as you said, simplify, look at exactly what you need to look at. Again, consumer behavior has changed. Everything is way more bespoke and way more customized. And there was a recent study done that showed that regardless of brand, 91% of this specific line of consumers were more than likely to book just on the basis of the personalized communication. And it didn't matter what segment it came from, whether it's from a business stream or a leisure stream, 91% was a really big turnaround. So I think having those analysts that are able to interpret the data based on what it is that you need and what you're trying to achieve to help the industry and help drive the best business propositions to the company that you're looking for.
Do I have any questions from the audience before I wrap up this panel discussion? Any questions on data? No? One very last one from me then. In 12 months' time, we're going to be back here in Thailand. What is something that you predict that we don't know about in this room in 12 months' time that you think we should walk away from?
Is it to me?
Well, I'm going to go through the panel, so I'll start with you, Mel.
I think it's more of a case of the world is so dynamic. It's changing at a faster pace than ever. And similarly to someone else's point earlier about invention, necessity is the mother of invention, and we don't know what we don't know. So all I can say is we're either not going to know even more next year, or we're going to have discovered more things that we did find out about.
We could be either more confused or more knowledgeable.
This is correct. Thank you for summarizing that beautifully.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Fenady?
I think in 12 months, given the learnings that we had, over the few months, the pandemic, et cetera, and how to work on efficiency, I think hoteliers or, anyone who's looking into travel will have an open mind or new perspective, or will be asking the right questions. Are we working efficiently?
We're going to be smarter next year.
Yeah, I think so.
And Sandeep?
I think in 12 months' time, we would have forgotten about COVID. We'd be worried about too much of business, too much of opportunity. And I'm hoping to see a very, very packed session, in a positive sort of a way.
And that's a lovely ending to this panel. With that, if you can just join me in giving my fellow panelists a round warm of applause.
Thank you.